Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we've got an early impression on a Dior, and I don't do many videos on Dior, mostly because my favorite Diors are all older. I like stuff like Jules from 1980. I like Fahrenheit, of course, from 88. And those are, I just consider almost like grail fragrances. You know, I don't want to screw up the review. I want to make sure that I take my time, and when I do a review that I really do it justice. And, you know, quite honestly, I don't have very many of the niche Diors. And what prompted this review is that Eugene invited me onto his channel Wednesday at noon, I believe noon Central Time. So Wednesday is going to be the 15th of March. And it's going to be me, Rich Mitch, Rudy, and Eugene, and we're going to do our top 5 Dior Privés. And so I've been thinking about this, and I have a few. I have a couple full bottles. I've got Leather Oud, I have Fève Delicieuses, I have some decants, I've got Bois d'Argent, I've got Mitzah, and I have a couple minis. Oh, I also have Santal Noir in this little decant that kind of looks like a Dior bottle, but it's just a decant. And I have, I've got a couple little small vials of Eau Noire, thanks to Rich Mitch. I've reviewed this on the channel, or at least did an early impression on Eau Noire. And I've got Spice Blend, and I have Oud Ispahan. And so this is what prompted this video today, is going on Eugene's channel on Wednesday to do our top 5 Dior Privés. Oh, and of course, Cuir Cannage. I've got 2 of these 10 ml decants, so I've got like 20 mils of Cuir Cannage. I would love a full bottle of some of these, like Cuir Cannage, Mitzah, vintage Eau Noire, but they're getting harder to find, and I don't know if it's worth spending that money for me, especially with my collection where it's at. So this is kind of what prompted this review. I know this. I've worn it to bed a couple times, but today I've really given it a full wear. I've been studying it, and so I want to kind of talk about it. You can see I've put a pretty good dent into my little decant here, and so let's talk about it. So whenever I do my ranking on the top 5 Privés from Dior, number 1 and number 2 are in no doubt, 0 doubt for me. I know what my number 1 and number 2 are. It's number 3, 4, and 5 where the spots are really up for grabs. And so I figured this would be a good, you know, opening to kind of talk about a fragrance that I haven't talked about on the channel hardly at all, because I don't own a bottle. This is all I have, this little 7.5 ml mini right here. And, you know, it's a Oud that came out in 2012. So let's talk about the fragrance and kind of the backstory and where it is and the notes that I get and how it makes me feel. So, first of all, it's from 2012, like I said. So this is a fragrance that came out by François Demachy, and it came out right at the heart of the Oud craze, if you will. I mean, if you were anyone who was anyone in 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, you had an Oud fragrance, right? And, you know, this is an Oud perfume, and it is at a point in time where Dior already had an Oud fragrance out. I mentioned Leather Oud earlier. Leather Oud came out actually a couple years before Oud Ispahan did. And so by now, Dior was kind of really into the Oud game, you could say, in 2012. And Leather Oud, it's interesting because Leather Oud can be a little bit challenging, if you will. So if you know Leather Oud, if you're aware of Leather Oud, Leather Oud has this animalic civet that comes out, and it can be very challenging. It's more fecal than Dior Ispahan is, to my nose anyways. But they do share some similarities, especially I think in the Oud used. And so I think what Dior basically did is I think the first thing that they did is they said, okay, we have Leather Oud. You know we have this challenging Oud fragrance, and it has a spot in our Privé line. What do we want to do with our next Oud fragrance? And I think the thought process from Dior is that they wanted to put out a Oud fragrance that maybe was a little bit more wearable, right? So the very first thing that they did, to me, is they turned up the rose. And they turned up the rose pretty heavily. This is truly a rose oud, whereas rose comes first, right? It's a rose, then oud, the way that I would describe Oud Ispahan. The rose itself is not shy. It's actually big and bold. A Middle Eastern style rose, you could say. It is in your face, almost this wet, jammy, Middle Eastern style rose. And I'm going to reference an interview that I did with Russian Adam many times in this review, but I would highly encourage you to go watch those 3 interviews that I did with Russian Adam. In one of those 3 interviews, we smelled actually all 50 of the ingredients that he sent me, and he sent me some amazing ingredients. Everything from real ouds to different types of roses, different types of patchouli, different types of sandalwood. I mean, it was just an amazing little package that he made for me. And I'm forever in his debt for that. Really helped me understand, I think, what's inside of the fragrances. And but one of the things that he sent me was some different types of roses. And, you know, everything from Taif rose, Bulgarian rose, Russian rose, Iranian rose, you know, you name it, it was kind of in that little package. And one thing I noticed is none of the roses that I smelled, the actual rose Ottos, smelled jammy. They didn't have this jammy smell. And I asked him about that. I said, hey man, what's with this? None of the roses having this jammy smell like you get in some of these fragrances. Because the rose here smells very big, bright red and jammy to me. And he said, well, a lot of that jammy rose material is kind of synthetic. Whenever you smell a jammy rose, a lot of the times it's a synthetic take on rose. And there's nothing wrong with that. One thing I will tell you from the get-go is I like this fragrance, okay? I like it. It's my kind of style of a rose oud, but you have to put it in perspective and you have to kind of know where to place it and the pros and cons in 2023. See, I don't have a bottle of this, so if you have a vintage bottle or something like that, then there's no need, especially with some of the sizes Dior does their bottles in. If you bought a big bottle years ago, you're not going to need another bottle of this ever. But for people that are coming late to the game, this review can be very important because, you know, it's not a new hype beast or anything like that. It's an expensive fragrance. We'll talk about price later on. But whenever you smell this, the very first thing you're going to get is that jammy rose. I've got a 8-hour dry down right here, and I've got a dry down of maybe 4 hours or so right here. So I've got to experience the opening multiple times today, and I have the late dry down right here. And so I would consider this maybe like a woody floral oud, rose oud fragrance, if you will. Resinous as well. Resinous is a big part of it, and we'll talk about some of that here coming up very soon. So let's talk about the oud itself, because I would not consider myself an oud expert or you know, I'm not an authority on oud, if you will, but I do like to dabble a bit here and there. And thanks to my friend Russian Adam and his gift, like I mentioned earlier. Here, let me show you some of the ouds and stuff that he sent me. So these are all kind of different types of oud right here. You know, you've got Chinese CO2, and you have Choco Barai, which was actually used in Russian oud. This was the Thai plantation oud used in Russian oud. You've got Philippines, and each one of these kind of have a different scent profile. So I know maybe you could say a little bit more than the average bear, but I wouldn't consider myself, I'm not like one of these people that spends $3,000 on 3 grams of a vintage rare oud tola that, you know, it's just not my thing, right? But I do enjoy, I'm getting more and more, you know, into the oud game, if you will. But I have a hard time spending huge money on these tiny little things that you put a tiny swipe on. It's just not my style, if you will. But I've really enjoyed getting to know these. Like I wore one of these to bed the other day, and you can see it stained the wood on the toothpick I used to kind of put it on. And you can still smell it on the toothpick clear as day. It's beautiful. So I'm proficient in oud, let's say. That's the way that I would describe myself. I'm proficient, but I'm not some sort of an expert, okay? I wouldn't consider myself an end-all, be-all. You know, people don't come for me for answers on different types of oud oils or anything like that. But last night, I was wearing this. And this is what I was wearing last night. It's called Indonesian Baroque. Indonesian Maroc. And, you know, wearing these different oud oils to bed, I love wearing oud to bed, by the way. It's so beautiful, relaxing. Your mind just kind of just releases, you know. And it's like it just really touches your mind, your body, your soul. It just is a very relaxing experience for me to wear real oud or to spray an oud fragrance on before bed. It doesn't have to be real oud. But these real ouds are beautiful the way they develop, and they just last forever. You know, the tiniest little bit right here on your wrist, and it'll last for 12 hours. And so I was wearing this Indonesian Maroc, and it almost has this gentle, soft, almost like you're heating oud chips on like a burner at very low temperature, okay? So imagine this very low temperature burn. You're heating the wood up very slowly, and it just releases this soft, woody oud with some slight stage of like this resinous cinnamon bit to it. This Indonesian Maroc has a very resinous, almost cinnamon-like feel to the oud, woody cinnamon. But it has a kind of gentle, soft, almost like you're heating soft wood. You know, nothing smells harsh or burning or dark or anything like that. And so, if you kind of put a gun to my head and said, Ramsey, what kind of oud is in Oud Ispahan? What do you think? I would say that the oud that's in Oud Ispahan is probably an oud from Laos. Laotian oud is my guess. And the reason I say that is I think there's a very similar type of oud that's used in this. This is Oud Palao by Diptyque. And if you know Oud Palao came out a couple years after Oud Ispahan, and you can see I put a pretty good dent in my 10 ml from Oud Palao. I really like this. I used to think I liked it a lot more than I do now. I think that Oud Ispahan was probably the inspiration for Oud Palao. This came out in 2015, and they share a similarity to me. The rose oud, you know, traditional combination with that Laotian oud is what it smells like to me. And I think, you know, right now, if you twisted my arm and said, okay, this is from 2012, and this is from 2015, and which one do you like more? Just if you got to pick one right now, I would probably take the Oud Ispahan, which might surprise some people because this is just, I think, one of the best rose ouds that you can buy for the money. I think you can get a full bottle of this for like $100, you know, or something like that. And for the money, it's a no-brainer. This is 3 times as much. And again, we'll talk about price later on, but I'm leaning a bit towards Oud Ispahan because it has a touch more resins. I like the way that the labdanum is done in Oud Ispahan a little bit more than in Oud Palao to me, although there is cistus in Oud Palao. There's something about the way the labdanum is used in Oud Ispahan where it just kind of hits you from the get-go. And I think I kind of like that. I like the way that the labdanum is just bam, front and center with Oud Ispahan. And I think you could wear either, honestly, and be very happy with your choice. I don't think you can go wrong with either. I think they would both kind of fit the same scenario, if you would. So going back to my friend Russian Adam, this is what kind of popped into my head as I was wearing Oud Ispahan today. Because in one of those interviews that we did, I don't remember which one, it might have even been the very first one, but all 3 are almost must-watches. I would highly encourage you to watch those interviews if you have not. Especially if you're interested in oud. The guy is an absolute treasure trove of knowledge. He's so willing to share what he knows with the community. He's kind of like just one of us, turned into a fragrance head, an oud distiller, you know, that kind of thing. It's kind of like having one of our own people on the inside, you know, because he's done all this thing from being a distiller to being a perfumer and having his own brand and all this stuff that he's done now in the last, since whenever Arige Ladoria was founded 6 years ago or whatever it is now. But he talks a little bit about, in one of those interviews, he talks a little bit about being an oud distiller and how coming back and kind of approaching perfumery from the eyes of a oud distiller and what you learn over 10 years of distilling oud and stuff like that, right? And one of the tricks of the trade in distillation is heat temperature. It's one of the simplest things, one of the first things you learn, he told me, is how high of a heat are you going to distill your oil at? And you can use heat to your advantage. So it's not in this actual pack. I have more of these packs over here, but in one of these packs, he sent me a couple different types of patchouli. And one of them was listed as like a smoky patchouli. And it literally smells like a barbecued, like a smoky patchouli. And I asked him, I said, hey man, how do you do this? Because this is really nice. And he said, simple. It's just the heat that you distill the patchouli at. If you turn the heat up a little bit more, the patchouli distills faster, hotter, and it almost gives it this burned-like smell. And I thought, that's really interesting. And that goes back to kind of, the next piece of the puzzle, if you would. It goes back to kind of viewing being a perfumer through the eyes of a distiller. Let's say you want to make a fragrance that has this smoky patchouli in it, then you would distill the patchouli that way, right? And so that was kind of what he was referring to, being a perfumer then through the eyes of a distiller. But one thing that he mentioned is when it comes to distilling oud and the temperatures that they distill oud at. I promise you there's a moral to there's a point to this story. Bear with me. So he was saying that, many of the ouds that you smell in fragrances like this, in Oud Ispahan or in Oud Palao, are distilled by folks that are rushing to get the distillation done. And what he means by that is sometimes when you distill an oud, and if you want a certain scent profile from that oud, sometimes it takes weeks, a month to distill an oud, a proper, oud distillation and have it done at the right temperature and the time and the, amount of time it takes for the oil to come and all that stuff and the different tricks of the trade. And he was mentioning that some of these ouds that are out there, especially in the designer realm, like this, feel like you get this burnt smell, almost like this tarry like smell, this rubber like smell, right? And as I was wearing Oud Ispahan today, and I know that this kind of makes me seem like maybe like perfume snob or being trebloon or whatever you want to call it, being obnoxious. But as I was smelling this today, I was thinking, you know what? The oud in here really almost feels like you're getting this burnt rubber, almost like you're getting this this tire-like smell, this dark, almost like they pushed out as much oil as they possibly could in the shortest amount of time at the highest heat just so they can move on to the next piece of wood. Now, that's the feeling. Now, that's assuming that there's real oud in here. I don't know if there is or not, okay? So don't come at me, Dior. I'm just saying, if there's real oud in here, bravo. But even if there is real oud, what I'm getting at is and again, I know this makes me sound like a snob, but now that I've kind of gone to the next level in my oud wearing experience, and I know the works of Russian Adam, Arij Ladore, or Ensar of Ensar Oud, or Dmitry Bortnikov of Bortnikov, it's very hard to then go back to something like Oud Ispahan. Because even though I enjoy this, I enjoy this fragrance. It may not sound like I do, but I promise you I do. I'm enjoying wearing it today. I like it. I like the smoky aspects of it. Part of me even secretly likes that rubbery, weird burnt smell that you get in the opening from the oud, mixed with the resins and the labdanum and stuff like that. But these type of fragrances, unfortunately, Oud Palao and Oud Ispahan, they don't impress me like they used to in the past. If I would have smelled this a couple years ago, I probably would have had a much different view on Oud Ispahan than I do today because of my experience with the indie houses and what they've showed us with what real oud, what high quality real oud smells like, right? So again, don't get me wrong. I like the perfume. I think it's a well-made perfume. And I just think I'm slowly kind of turning into an oud head is what it feels like. I'm slowly turning into someone that demands more from these houses. And whenever I smelled some of those Xerjoffs on my live streams, you can go check out those live streams if you're interested. But the Xerjoff live streams, I continually said that, hey, you know, this is nice. So I think one of them was like Fars or something like that. The other one was Ceylon, or, you know, and I was like, you know, these are nice. They're not bad, but they feel dated. I said the same thing with Memos Oud, Luxor Oud, they called it. It feels like it was made for a time that doesn't exist anymore. Like, the fragrance industry has moved on. I think Oud will now always be with us, but our expectations as consumers demand more. So, if someone's from Dior is listening to me, which I doubt they are, but if they ever are listening, this is what somebody like me I would demand more for the price of what Oud Ispahan goes for. We'll talk a little bit about that. So let's read the little blurb from Dior. So here's the thing. Here's the thing, right? Is a 4.2 ounce bottle, which is this size. I think this is a 4.2 ounce. I believe this is. Let's just say it is, because I think it is. So this is a 4.2 ounce. Goes for $330 on Dior.com. And a 8.5 ounce goes for $450. So you get double the juice for only $120 more. To top it off even more, listen to this pricing, okay? A 15-ounce bottle. So then double the juice of the 8.5 ounce. How much do you think it is? Think it's double the price of the 8.5 ounce? No, it's the same price as the 8.5 ounce. Why? Because it doesn't have a sprayer. So here's what Dior says about Oud Ispahan. They say that the name Oud Ispahan elegantly embraces a warm identity. It is the olfactory translation of a warm palace, where shimmering hues meld with intoxicating scents to become one. Character, sophisticated charm, and a traveler's soul influence the powerful character and accents of Oud Ispahan. It is an uncompromising fragrance that highlights its woody force with the spicy, decisive character of Damascus rose. Distinctive feature. Oud Ispahan is a fragrance that arouses curiosity and invites you on an olfactory journey with its warm soul tinged with a floral softness. Color. The ochre hue of the warm palace that inspired the fragrance and the intensive red of the Damascus rose. Family. Oud floral. It is a member of the Maison Christian Dior family of precious ouds. Okay, so let's go back to this precious oud, okay? Because if the juice inside of these little bottles, or this is a little bottle, but let's say the big bottles, was so precious, then how can they afford to give you double the 8.5 ounce bottle for the same price? Explain that to me. If the juice in here is so precious, if the oud is so rare, right? How is a 15-ounce bottle $450 and an 8.5 ounce bottle is $450 just because one has a sprayer and one doesn't? How? I'll tell you how. Because the juice inside is not as precious as Dior would like to make it seem. And again, I know I sound like I don't like this fragrance, but I actually do. I just think it's a fragrance made for oud tastes a decade ago. Tastes have changed. And I know Oud is making a killing out of this and they don't want to discontinue it. They don't want to discontinue it because of the fact that they are making an absolute killing off of $450. They could give you a 150-ounce bottle of this for $450 and they'd still be making a killing. Forget a 15-ounce bottle. Forget an 8.5-ounce bottle. They could give you a 150-ounce bottle of this and they would still be making a killing. They could sell this by the jug load. And that's the problem that I think now as consumers, we know what oud smells like thanks to Arise Ladore and Ensar and all this stuff. And, you know, I think we just demand, we demand a little bit more. As an oud head, smelling this burnt tire, you know, a cool harshness, this dark harshness, just smells kind of cheap to me now. And, you know, speaking of cheap oud, okay, so here's the thing. If you're going to go down this road, this designer oud road, let me tell you some tips that I gave to someone who came to me previously and said, hey man, I really want leather oud, but I don't want to spend the money, or I can't spend the money. I'm a student in college. Can you recommend something else that will get this scent profile of Dior's oud without the money? Absolutely. It's this. This is One Man Show Oud Edition. Now, you may laugh, okay? You may laugh at One Man Show Oud Edition, but let me tell you something about One Man Show Oud Edition. It is the best oud fragrance you can buy for $15, all right? There's no doubt about that. It is the best oud fragrance for $15 money can buy. It's oud, it's leather, it's patchouli, it's papyrus, it's galbanum, it's red thyme, bergamot, spices, and geranium. And it smells, actually, give it 15, 20, 30 minutes to settle down. The opening can be a little bit harsh, but after half an hour, it smells very close to Dior's leather oud. They smell very similar, but this doesn't screw around. It just goes, oh, you want this oud material, this black oud, this Noir Limbinol, this whatever these houses are using to recreate this oud, fine. Here, we'll just give it to you. Just bam, here, take it. And we won't pretend this is a $500 fragrance. We'll just give it to you for 15 bucks and we're still making money. And that's part of the problem, I think, with the oud game right now is, and I'm not saying One Man Show Oud Edition is the same as Oud Ispahan. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that at all. Oud Ispahan is a higher class fragrance. You can smell it from as soon as you spray it. But into the dry down, honestly, it just seems like Dior doesn't have much of an advantage. They lost their leg to stand on. Other than the cool bottle and the name to fall back on, my nose tells me there's not much special to this. I like the fragrance because it's a fragrance that this kind of DNA appeals to me. Especially now, I'm turning into a huge oud head all of a sudden. But yes, it's, I don't know if it's worth the money is the thing. I'd have to find a vintage bottle pretty heavily discounted to really want to pull the trigger on Oud Ispahan. Okay, now that I gave Dior its lumps, and they deserve its lumps, and again, if someone's listening from Dior, I hope you're taking this to heart. I hope you're taking this constructively and not just me bashing the brand. Now the positives. So that resinous opening, that labdanum opening mixed with the oud is beautiful. It absolutely is. I love that labdanum that just kind of hits you right in the opening. It's resinous. It's slightly smoky. And I love the way it's used here. I think it's used expertly. And the first half an hour, I think, is where Oud Ispahan really shines against something like a $15 One Man Show Oud Edition. The opening really, you can tell this is the more expensive fragrance, let's say, okay? Now, can you tell it's the more expensive fragrance against Oud Palao, which is half price? That I don't know. That would be a tougher call, but I just think personally, I do prefer Oud Ispahan. And the other thing about this, about Oud Ispahan, well, first of all, I should have told you this at the beginning, but there is a ancient designation in Middle Persian called Ispahan. And Ispahan is a major city in the central district of Iran. And in English, it's basically pronounced Ispahan, right? And it's about 270 miles south of Tehran, Iran's capital. And it has all these beautiful, old temples and, mosques and stuff like that, gardens. I looked at some of the pictures. Apparently, it's really a beautiful place to go. But it has a ton of history going back to, hundreds, thousands potentially, 1600 before Christ, in the Bronze Age. Alexander the Great, swept his armies through Persia and that part of the world. It's got a lot of history, let's say, and I think that's kind of where the name comes from, just in case anyone is interested in the name Ispahan. There's a lot of kind of cool artifacts from Ispahan, the Iranian city. And so that's kind of the mindset when you're thinking of Oud Ispahan. But one thing that's not listed on the note breakdown, which if you go to Dior.com, again, the notes basically say, Oud Ispahan, this is from Francois de Machy. Oud Ispahan opens the doors to an ochre-walled palace filled with captivating fragrances, the smoky trail of smoldering wood, the softness of floral water, lingering on washed hands. It is the fragrance of the voluptuous atmosphere where scents of rose, frankincense, and resin waft in the air. A fragrance as velvety plump as the roses of the Far East. I will agree with velvety and plump. This is a big rose fragrance. And it says it's without compromise. Oh, well, I don't know about all that, but I do think it's a good fragrance. However, I don't think the note listing is complete because on Parfumo, it shows labdanum in the top, patchouli in the heart, oud in the base with rose and sandalwood. And I can kind of see Dior's sandalwood used here. There's actually a fragrance that comes up a couple years later called Santal Noir, which is rose, sandalwood, and ambrette. And the rose and sandalwood and Santal Noir remind me heavily of the rose and sandalwood in Oud Ispahan. There's no oud here. Or they say there's no oud here. It kind of smells like there may be a hint of something. They say it's ambrette and not... I love Dior's ambrette, by the way. But they say it's ambrette and not oud. But these two, Oud Ispahan and Santal Noir, definitely kind of share some similarities between the rose and sandalwood, if not more. But one of the things that is not listed in Oud Ispahan that I smell clear as day is cypriol, or Nagamata oil. And if you know cypriol, you'll pick it out here. If you have a little bit of a... if you've smelled other fragrances that use cypriol and you kind of know its mark, you'll smell the cypriol here. In fact, I reviewed a fragrance from Roja Dove called Taif Oud. And it was originally a Fortnum & Mason exclusive called Fortnum & Mason Taif Oud. You can go check out my review for Roja's Taif Oud. He has now since re-released it under just his brand, not the Fortnum & Mason exclusive. It's just Taif Oud. It's 750 euros, if I'm not mistaken. Sorry, pounds. 750 pounds for, or maybe it was dollars. I can't remember. Either way, it's expensive. For 100 mil, okay? 750. Let's say it's $750, so that's like 650 pounds, right? $750 for 100 mils of Taif Oud. And you'll smell this cypriol, you know, heavy, and I like that fragrance. I liked it. I thought it was a good fragrance, but there's a huge hit of cypriol in the opening of that. And you'll get that same style of cypriol. It's blended with the oud to make it have this exotic like smell. I did an entire video on cypriol. It's also known as Nagamata. You can go check that video out under my Not a Top 10. I have a playlist for all of the houses and all of the video types that I do. So if you go to my playlist and click on Not a Top 10, you can find that cypriol video. If you go to the playlist and click on Roja Dove, you can find the Roja Taif Oud video that I've done. But, and the decant of Taif Oud was very kindly sent to me from Armando. So thank you, Armando. Everything kind of seems to come together at some point. So yeah, there's definitely this cypriol-like feeling in here, which I like. I like cypriol. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just don't like when these brands are like, oh, we're using the most rare, expensive oud from the Far East, and you know, we trek through the jungles of Cambodia to hunt down this oud, and you smell it, and you're like, this is patchouli and cypriol, dude. But yes, there is a big patchouli hit here as well, I would say, which I like. I like the patchouli use. I like the way that the patchouli is used here. But you can smell it. I mean, you can smell this patchouli, and that's another common... You know, cypriol is one, patchouli is another, common used as like a oud, you know, to give this oud-like effect, let's say. And it's all here. All the tricks of the trade are here in Oud Ispahan. So, do I hate it? No. Do I like it? Yes. Do I love it? No. Will it be in my top 5 Dior Privés on the countdown on Wednesday? You'll have to stay tuned for that. It very well still may make the top 5, because there's not very many... there's not very many Dior Privés that I just absolutely love, to be honest with you. And so yes, I'll have to think about how I'm going to rank these, but yes, this is my take on Oud Ispahan. I think it's a good fragrance. It feels a little bit dated in the same way that some of those older Xerjoffs or older Memo Paris Ouds feel a little bit dated, but I still like it. I wouldn't mind a vintage bottle. But I won't pay the crazy prices. I need a splitter. That's what I need. I need a splitter that can kind of split stuff with me and send the bottle, pay a little bit more for the bottle kind of thing, and they can take half the juice. But because I don't need full bottles nowadays with my collection like it is. But yes, glad to get to try it. I'm glad I got hunted down this little 7.5 ml mini. If you have experience with Oud Ispahan, do let me know. Let me know what your experience with Oud Ispahan is. And do leave a comment below. You know, a like and a subscription and all that stuff definitely helps with the YouTube algorithm. I love the little community that we're making here. I love seeing your faces in the comments, and I'll hopefully see you again soon with another video. Cheers, guys. Bye now.